Hola a todos, bienvenidos una vez más a este ciclo de conversación sobre transformación digital que realizamos en conjunto y en alianza con nuestro partner América Retail, el portal de noticias de negocios más importante de América Latina. Estamos muy contentos de tener un invitado especial hoy de Estados Unidos. Él es Robert Moritz, Global Chairman de PricewaterhouseCoopers, quien nos compartirá su visión y testimonio, el testimonio de Price respecto a esta coyuntura y respecto a esta nueva normalidad que estamos atravesando. Espero que disfruten el video. Aquí empezamos. Bob Moritz is Global Chairman de PricewaterhouseCoopers International. Robert has been in PwC since 1985, becoming a chairman in 2016. He's focused on creating a common culture based on quality, ethics, diversity, developing a workforce for the future. He's also actively involved in the World Economic Forum, member of the International Business Council, among other organizations. PricewaterhouseCoopers, as everyone knows, is a professional services network of firms operating as a partnerships under the PwC brand globally. It's the second largest professional service network in the world and is considered one of the big four consulting firms. Probably everyone who is watching the video right now, the interview knows about PwC. But anyways, Bob, will you please share with us a brief introduction of the company?
Sure. Thanks, Aldo. So PwC around the world is about 275,000 people, and we operate in about 157 countries around the world. So we have a great opportunity to see many different business perspectives, political and economic perspectives. The services, as many of you know, focus on providing audit, tax, deals, and consulting services to organizations. That's typically businesses or governments around the world that need help in two areas. Either A, more trust in them as a company, which comes from, for example, our work in the audit and tax space, or getting to better outcomes. Better results, results that impact their shareholders as well as their stakeholders, going from financial results to more broader sustainability development goals that each of them are looking to achieve right now. And our job is to recruit and develop the best talent to deploy that, and then bring those expertise, those products and those services to our clients each and every day to deliver the value that they need to be sustainable for the future.
Thanks. Bob, the pandemic has sent the global economy into one of the worst recessions ever, and it's not clear when a full recovery will be taking place. The spread of COVID since the beginning of 2020 forced many countries into months of lockdown, affecting the economy activity. According to the World Bank, the global growth has projected a contraction of almost 5% by 2020. So what evaluation PwC has made of this situation caused by coronavirus? What has been the economic and social impact, and what have we lost and what have we learned so far?
So first off, Aldo, it's a tragedy when you think about the human aspects coming from the pandemic, both in terms those that we've lost, those that have been impacted and affected the healthcare system or today burdened by the challenges they have, but also the change in life and lifestyle that everybody has had. So in terms of the loss, it's well known as you look at the human aspects as well as the economic aspects as you talked about. What we have learned though from a business perspective is three things. First, we've seen a great amount of innovation. We've seen humanity and technology come together like never before. If you think about the development of the vaccinations that we now have and the vaccines that are available to us or should be available to us shortly in more scale, that's a tremendous demonstration of innovation that we've never seen before with speed, urgency, and scalability. And that's a positive that we should reflect on and build upon. Second is the challenge for many is how quickly can people adapt to a new way of working, a new way of living. The organizations around the world that we've seen have been able to move with speed. They've changed their supply chain. They've changed their customer experience. They've changed their delivery model. They've learned to work more virtually or digitally than ever before. And the ones that could do that the fastest, scale the quickest, and deliver a customer experience in a new digital world, a home world, otherwise, those are the ones that are taking advantage of the opportunities that are put in front of them. But it's still not without challenges. The COVID-19 pandemic has accentuated and put on steroids some of the trends we're already seeing. Job loss created by technology that we were experienced previously and worried about became a big reality. The challenge of our education systems was challenged prior to COVID and now has become even more challenged in terms of the access to education and those that are not able to get that through their local school systems, their local communities, or otherwise. And likewise, the healthcare systems around the world. Our healthcare systems were not equipped to deal with something en masse that has been such a challenge for them to deal with, and dealing with not only those that potentially needed to be tested or those that were sick, but obviously those that were in critical stages or ultimately passed away. So there's a lot of, I'll call, lessons learned for us to reflect on and build upon as we think about challenging ourselves as a group of leaders, political, community, and business leaders around the world to take these lessons, these learnings, and apply them on a going forward basis.
The OECD ran a survey exploring issues on the coronavirus outbreak. Some conclusions are interesting. 57% of the respondents believe their country is now more divided than before the coronavirus. 63% of are economic pessimistic on the long-term future. 62% think that there will be less job security in the future as well. So it's a little hard scenario. What should business leaders and policymakers be thinking in order to repair the economy, and how to reduce poverty and employment and social instability?
Yeah, so all of those statistics you described are really important ones to set the context for what organizations need to do, what countries need to do. We've used at PwC a 5R approach. They need to step back and repair the damage that's been done. Think about the debt that's on the balance sheets of our governments, and for that matter, our businesses today. And that debt was incurred not for investment, but for survivability and operations. We've got to think about how to deal with that in terms of the economic implications, challenges, and thankfully we're in a relatively low interest rate environment generally, although I know there's some parts of Latin America where that's not the case. So we got to repair the damage. We then have to step back and say, let's reassess what's our mission, what's our purpose, what are we trying to achieve, and take those external environmental factors into consideration, making sure we're focused not only on our shareholders, but also the group of stakeholders, a stakeholder group that clearly is important to all of us, and a stakeholder group that is much more challenging as they now have, through technology, social media, and the others, the ability to be a judge and a jury as to what people are doing and judging whether it's right or wrong, and amplify their voice in that judgment. The third thing they need to do in terms of the 5 R's is then reconfigure. What assets do they have? What opportunities are in front of them? And really get focus and a sense of urgency to take advantage of the opportunities that are there today. As I said earlier, organizations that are moving with speed and scale will be more successful and can contribute to grow, to ultimately eventually invest. And that has opportunity, for example, in job employment. And then restart with that sense of urgency. But the last R is one about reporting. There is a tremendous lack of trust in society. We see that with academic studies. We've seen it in the world that we're living in today. That could be trust in media, trust in government, trust in business, trust in one another. So in order to demonstrate and enhance that trust, we also expect that people should report more. What are the goals they're setting? What are the progress that they're making? And do it more consistently so people can compare. And thereafter, the stakeholders can be the judge as to where to deploy capital to those that are making the most improvement, or to make the decisions in terms of where they want to work going forward. We see financial activism. We've seen that over the last few years. We're going to see more social activism, which means employees, consumers, and others will be the judge and jury in terms of gravitating towards the companies that they think are doing the right things in their eyes, and they want to be associated with them. So those 5 R's become really important for business leaders to step back and think through, and then get very granular and action-oriented. Here, they've got to be focused on what they can control. There's a lot going on in the world that we can't control as a business leader. The social unrest that you talked about has been inevitable. It's been building in terms of the haves and have-nots. You have the ability maybe to influence, but not control. So let's make sure that people do what they can in the areas they can control themselves, influence to the extent possible, and then work with others to influence even more so on the larger societal issues going forward. But each leader has a role to play, and that means you need to engage, you need to listen, you need to learn, and then respond accordingly.
Certainly. So developed countries such as the US and Japan and those located in Western Europe have headquarters of the world's largest corporations. What can Latin American companies learn from world-class organizations, and what best practice should be business leaders considering applying?
So a couple of things that you think about when you look at the organizations that are world-class in nature and doing well today. They're not just surviving, they're thriving. First and foremost, they have really stuck to that 5R strategy. They've been very focused in terms of the areas they see the opportunities and the changes they need to make to take advantage of those opportunities. And they are really disciplined from an operational perspective with the focus to move with speed and urgency and take cost and bureaucracy out of the system. Cost in terms of finding areas to service that debt or reduce that debt and invest. Time and bureaucracy out of the system to get speed in their decision-making process. The second thing they've done really well is leverage digital. Digital organizations now have the ability to leverage data to make quicker and faster, better decisions, have the ability to scale more across the world and take advantage of the opportunities in front of them. There's an ROI that comes faster, and they have the ability to standardize, and they have the opportunity to adapt faster and better. And we see when companies go after this concept of digitization, having a much faster ROI in the investment that they need to make. The third thing is to make sure that they equip their workforce. We have to reskill our employees to make sure they're fit for the future. That skilling goes to not only how to use technologies, but also how to adopt technologies to live and work differently than in the past, but also how to lead in a technology-enabled digital virtual world. And that's a new set of skill sets that they have to think about. Last but not least, I think one of the challenges, particularly for countries like, for example, Latin America, is you've relied a lot on the labor force. Technology has been a little bit more expensive because of either the taxation on technology or other elements. But there's a big opportunity over the next few years where I think the combination of bringing humanity and technology together more so will help the organizations there as well be successful. The last point I would make is where governments and business have to work more so together. Government can't do this by themselves, nor can business. And that's where we see across the rest of the world in these major countries and with the major corporates, you'll see a lot more partnership, public-private partnership. You saw that with the creation of the vaccines. The individual companies that were able to create the vaccines had to work closely with the governments to think about how to manage the regulatory and quality processes. That public-private partnership is going to be so much more important as we think about the opportunities going forward and how quickly countries and companies can recover for some of the economic and social issues that they're all dealing with post the pandemic.
The pandemic has been a major test for leaders. Actually, it was a really tough time for everyone. Life, as we know, it has changed forever. Maybe a leader has to find a new way, a new approach to guide their teams into a new normal, next normal. What is the role of the CEO amid the pandemic? How optimistic or pessimistic they are? And how should they be dealing with these challenges?
So we should look at a couple of historical perspectives when you think about crisis and crisis management. And that's what we're in, a crisis. Started out as a health crisis, it became a much more social crisis, and obviously has now turned into an economic crisis as well. In times of crises, CEOs need to be focused on a few key things. First, they need to absorb as much data as possible. So two-way conversations with their stakeholders, their employees, their leaders, their consumers, their business partners, their banks, their equity owners, and the like, and the government included in that, are really important to assimilate data points so they can determine the best course of strategy and the execution of that strategy going forward. Second, they've got to bring an authentic point of view to the table. They've got to engage authentically. People want to hear what's really going on. And in order to do that, you've got to be certain where you have confidence of that certainty. You have to be honest when you don't have the answers. And you have to talk about the possibilities of what those scenarios may look like going forward. Equally as important is to talk about not only what you did, but why you did it. The more you can talk about the why, the more likely you get your employees, your consumers, your business partners willing to be with you, stick with you, and be part of the strategic journey going forward. And to your point on optimism, yes, CEOs should be optimistic when times call for it, but they have to be realists as well. And the challenge for them is to think about how much stress is in their organizations, how much more pressure can they put on it, and make sure they're ensuring that the stress doesn't become paralyzing, but rather there's enough, I'll call it anxiety in the system, that is productive and allows for them to drive change in a positive way that benefits not only the company, but their employees as well. Not only the investors, but the broader group of stakeholders. And the more they can think that way and manage their leadership teams to do the same and develop the leaders of the future to think about it this way, I think the better off that we'll all be, and the better off these companies will be as well. The last point, leaders with titles is one thing. All of us can be leaders in terms of the actions we take, but leaders are human. They can't do it all, regardless if you have a title or not. So leveraging yourself, picking your hot spots in terms of what's most important, and focusing your time and energy and leveraging the rest of your team is another key attribute, particularly during this crisis, that they have to think about, including taking care of themselves. And that's the last point I would make, Aldo. What we've seen is there's an element of physical and mental stress in addition to the implications of the pandemic. People have to be focused about creating the right environment to ensure that people are taking care of one another also.
Thanks, Bob. We are running out of time right now. So I want to try to just try to summarize a couple of questions more for you. Very short ones for you. Even before the pandemic, it was clear that many jobs will be transformed and changed by technologies such as artificial intelligence, cloud computing, big data, and so on. Just COVID-19 has only accelerated this trend. Something you mentioned before, what is the importance of upskilling employees to stakeholders, to societies?
So quickly, society today is challenged. We have a divisiveness that you talked about earlier. We have a group of people that are in the positive side of the equation. There's others that feel like they're left out. COVID has only exacerbated that when you think about the millions and millions of jobs that have been lost because of the COVID pandemic, but we were trending in that direction because of advancements in technology and automation. As a result, education becomes so more important. We're going to be launching next week a study with the World Economic Forum that talks about the fact that if we are able to do upskilling and skilling of people more broadly, more consistently, it not only creates new job opportunities, it creates economic opportunities for those individuals, for the business, and for the country. That economic prosperity is needed personally, as well as across a country, for it to be able to invest for the future. So the connection points around education, job creation, matching those skills, and doing so with speed now becomes very important to set the course on a much more brighter path as we think about economic prosperity at the local level and the individual level, as much as we do at a country or a broader societal level.
And finally, it's probably you already mentioned that before, but anyways, in PwC opinion, which are the trends that organizations should consider today to better serve its customers and societies and partners post-pandemic?
Yeah, it's clear today that there is a tremendous amount of focus right now on what I'll call the financial stability and sustainability of organizations. But the world is telling us we have to think about other aspects: ESG, environment, social, governance. And going back to the UN's Sustainability Development Goals, it's equally as important to be focused on that. So we're recommending that businesses really get to other non-financial metrics that they should be measuring and incenting the right behavior, to think about things like climate, to think about the social aspects in the healthcare system, to think about education. Again, the world's going to expect that, and the world needs the business community to participate in that. Likewise, governments have to pivot away from just GDP as being the sole metric that everybody focuses on. We can increase GDP, but at the expense of the environment. So bringing those two things together becomes so much more important. So ESG, climate change, and the issue of trust, I think, are going to be the issues that the business communities and government leaders have to work on going forward as you think about coming out of the pandemic. That'll be so important to the citizens of the world and the citizens of the countries within Latin America as well.
Thank you very much, Bob. Thank you very much for sharing with us your experience, your opinion, your view, and the view of PwC about this pandemic era we are facing and we are going through. Hoping after this we are all become better persons, better organizations, better companies, better countries. Thank you very much again for accepting the invitation. We hope to see you again back in the future.
Great. Thank you, Aldo. It was a pleasure being with you today.
Thank you very much.
Take care and stay safe.
Gracias. Thank you. Una vez más, muchas gracias a todos ustedes por acompañarnos en esta versión con Pricewaterhouse, con Bob Moritz, Global Chairman de Pricewaterhouse. Nos vemos en una próxima oportunidad. Hasta luego.